Hello, I am Uncle Slam, and this is my first submission for SGDQ 2019. This is Pac-Man Adventures in Time, no skips, on easy difficulty. With that said, let's just jump right into it. Okay, so you'll notice right away that this looks pretty much like a traditional Pac-Man game where you're going through mazes and eating all the dots. This game consists of 45 different mazes, where the goal of each maze is to eat all the dots before progressing to the next one. But there are a few things that differentiate it from a typical Pac-Man game. The most significant being the jump feature, which I just used right there to jump over that ghost. So you might have noticed in the upper left-hand corner of the screen there's a pink bar, and that depleted when Pac-Man jumps. That will gradually replenish itself over time, pretty quickly on easy difficulty. It takes a little longer to do that on harder difficulties, but we're just going to focus on easy right now. So right here, one of the biggest uses of it in the speedrun is using it to jump up slopes. So the way slopes work in this game is pretty much the way you'd expect. When Pac-Man runs down them, he goes a little faster. When he runs up them, he goes a little slower. But if he's in the air, it doesn't matter what's below him. He'll always have the same forward momentum he'll have as if he's on a flat slope. So we can use that to our advantage to jump up slopes and then collect any pellets we miss while he's in the air on the way down. We can also use it to jump over the ghosts or any other obstacles in our way that would otherwise kill Pac-Man, so we don't have to worry about the 2-second death animation. And just like that, we're coming into the third maze. I can use this one as a little bit of a demonstration for the cameras. So there are two cameras in this game. This is the one the game wants to default to, that's focused on Pac-Man. I don't typically like using this one because it limits your view of the maze as a whole. So I'll usually just stick with this type of camera most of the time. There will be situations later on where I'm forced to use the Pac-Man focused camera, but I'll explain that later on. As for now, one of the biggest time savers over the course of the run is not eating ghosts. Well, actually, first I should mention that this game also comes with mini-games between some of the mazes. So right away here, we have our first chase minigame. So the way this game handles the minigames is it doesn't really care if you win or lose any particular minigame. It just wants to check to see if you have finished it or not. So depending on the minigame, I will either win it or lose it intentionally, depending on whatever's faster. So chase minigames like that, we will always try to lose, because if we try to go all the way to the end of the courses, that will take way too long, and we don't want that in speedrun. Plus, the only thing we're missing out from intentionally losing any of the minigames is more points, and the only thing points give us are more lives. And in this game, we really don't care about how many lives we have at any given point. There is one part of the run where we do take an intentional death. That's closer to the middle of the run though, so I'll explain that when we get there. But besides that, we typically don't die that much, at least on easy difficulty. So we'll just come through here. So this is Boulder Trouble. This is the first maze that actually utilizes cycles in order to figure out the route. So you'll see at the top of the screen that there are two different boulders that gradually come down the slopes in certain intervals. And I'm able to use those intervals to make a route that pretty much guarantees that Pac-Man won't get hit by the boulders. If he does get hit by them, that is lethal and he will lose a life and go back to the start of the maze. And that does lose a little bit of time, so yeah, right there was a little bit of a slip up, but the way I have it routed, you can afford to miss 1 or 2 dots and backtrack them. Worst case scenario, but overall this maze went fine. And now we're going into Egyptian times. I'll explain the structure of the game in a bit, but this maze has those snakes that you can see in baskets around the maze. They also come out in different intervals, so I route this so that I'm able to collect these, or not. Usually I get that one right before the snake pops out, but as you can see there, that the snakes in this maze and several future mazes aren't lethal, they'll just stun Pac-Man for a little bit before he's able to move again. So it's definitely not one of the worst obstacles in this game, but you still don't want to be hit by them ideally. There's also a little bit of a slope here. So this next minigame works like sleight of hand, where basically we have this follow the fruit minigame, and if you guess the right basket, it'll take you into future rounds. Alternatively, if you choose the wrong basket right away, it'll just end there. Funny thing about that, in that first set of 3 where you have to find the banana will always end in the same basket it starts in, so ideally you can just button mash the control button, which selects whatever basket you want to choose. Assuming the banana doesn't start in the leftmost basket, oh, this is really bad RNG. So you've got about a 2 in 3 chance that you can just mash your way through that without any time loss. Otherwise, you need to move the arrow over and select one of the baskets that was not the leftmost basket. But it's a really minor time loss if you do get unlucky, so it's like a 1/5 of a second at most. That aside... Oh, I was going to talk about something before, but I forgot what it was. Yeah, cool thing about this maze is that you can jump across the roofs if you bounce off of the banisters like that. Yeah, here we've got some more snakes, so once again I route around them so I don't have to worry about Pac-Man getting bit. You'll also see that I jump up the ladders because those also function as slopes. This maze introduces elevators. Now, the way they work is when Pac-Man or any of the ghosts hit one of them, they'll gradually slide up, as you'll see right here. So it takes a second, but you'll eventually get to the second floor. An important thing to note about them is that they can only handle one entity at a time. So you can't have 2 ghosts on one, and you can't have Pac-Man and ghosts. Well, obviously, otherwise Pac-Man would die if that were the case. However, you'll notice that when Pac-Man eats a ghost, that ghost will turn into a set of eyes, and they won't harm Pac-Man, but if they do beat Pac-Man to an elevator, the elevator will take priority on the eyes instead of Pac-Man. So that can kind of ruin your day. So this minigame is a basic match the tiles, and that's actually perfect RNG there. Yeah, so that can give you a bunch of different patterns. I think there's a predetermined amount of patterns it can give you, but as you can probably tell, that was by far the best luck I could have gotten there. So this maze, the upper portion of it is just a giant slope, as I'll kind of try to demonstrate here. So this is a perfect example of where I try to jump up the slopes as much as reasonably possible while sliding down them as much as possible while still collecting all of the dots, just for minor time saves. It doesn't lose a ton of time if you don't jump. I think in this maze it's only like a difference of maybe 3 seconds, but over the course of the run that will add up if you decide not to jump uphill at all. But now I remember what I was going to talk about. So, eating ghosts in this game, you might have noticed, also reflects the traditional arcade-style Pac-Man, in which a small little pause will happen for half a second while Pac-Man eats the ghost, and the points you get from that are displayed. That takes half a second every time, so like right there, the game kind of paused for half a second before I could move Pac-Man again. Now, half a second time loss obviously is not that huge a deal, but over the course of the run, the more ghosts you eat, the more time will rack up because you ate so many ghosts. I think world record right now has 30 eaten ghosts. So that comes out to 15 additional seconds that you really can't control that much. So you do want to mitigate that time loss as much as reasonably possible. This is another cool cycle-based maze where the volcano will spew out fireballs at the 4 different corners. All of the fireballs are on their own individual cycles, though. So you'll see, like, at the start they came out at almost, one right after another. But you can kind of notice now that the gaps between them are widening. So you do kind of have to keep track of all 4 corners at once in order to, like, fully get where the cycles are. But if you use the route I'm using, typically you don't have to worry about getting hit by them, because, like most obstacles in this game, they will kill Pac-Man if you let them hit it. And this is our first 3D maze in the game. I would say if you have motion sickness, focus on the horizon, but since that moves too, I'm sorry. But this is an instance where I'm forced to use the Pac-Man oriented camera, mostly because you can't have a top-down view of a 3D surface. That's just not how physics works, or spatial orientation for that matter. But there aren't too many of these in the game. I don't know how many there are exactly, but if ever you see me not using the top-down camera, it's likely because I just can't. But this is a very basic version of it. There are more advanced ones later on. This is just the game's way of introducing this style of maze to you. So here we have another chase minigame. We're just gonna ram into the wall and let the alligator chase us. This maze has a lot of like really small slopes that you really can't get a feel for with the top-down camera unless you're really familiar with the game. Of course, that probably goes for a lot of the mazes in this game. But yeah, right there, if you see me jumping randomly like that, it's not actually random, it's just to take advantage of the slopes that are there. Because I know where they all are, so I know how to make sure Pac-Man gets through optimally. Something about the teeter-totters in this stage, if you actually flip one while a ghost is on the other end, they'll just get sent flying into the sky and eventually like have to go back to the ghost house in the center to recover. So that's a neat little thing they added to the game. So this next maze is also a 3D maze, but it's a different style. This is the one maze in the game where you actually can't jump, and that's because Pac-Man has a pair of gravity boots equipped that let him stick to the walls of this map while he's not on the top surface. Now you can see here that in the upper right corner, the gravity boots will deplete in energy over time, and Eden pellets won't replenish them. So they do need to come to the top surface in order to refill their gauge. Otherwise, if they fill out while Pac-Man's on the side of the map, he'll plummet to his death and will get spawned back at the top, and there's no real good way to work that into the run. So we just try to mitigate it. But yeah, it's a neat mechanic. So right there's the first piece of a thing in this game called the artifact. So basically, to talk about the plot of this game for a little bit, there's this thing called the artifact that is meant to ward off evil from the Pac-Man kingdom. And one day the ghosts come and steal it, so despite the fact that it's supposed to ward off evil, the ghosts are still able to get right up to it and steal it, so that's a thing. And what they do with it is they take it to their evil leader, who has a name, I don't remember what it is. But they take it to him, he splits it into 4 different parts, and sends each of those parts back into a different period of time. And Pac-Man then has to go back in time to 4 different periods, those being prehistoric, Egyptian, medieval, and Wild West, to recruit all 4 parts. And essentially bring it back to the present so he can save the day, as you do in video games. So those are the 4 themes of maps we'll be seeing here. They're all split into 5 different it's 8 different sections, so each era in time has 2 sections of 5 maps based on that era. So the first 5 mazes in this game were all based on prehistoric, the 5 mazes after that were based on Egyptian, then we went back to 5 prehistoric mazes, and now we're in medieval. So it splits them up a little awkwardly, but it's Pac-Man. So right here, these logs will kill Pac-Man if they hit him. I did not get the best pattern there, but it's fine. And this is another 3D maze that's literally just a giant mushroom. Yeah, the big problem with this maze is just the way the power pellets are spaced out. So there's a giant section where Pac-Man isn't able to eat any based on the way it's routed. So he is pretty vulnerable. Obviously we don't want to hit the ghosts when they're not blue, but if they are blue, that loses half a second if we eat them, so it's little bit of a lose-lose situation if they get in our way, but yeah, fortunately they cooperated for the most part, so that's pretty good. And this upcoming maze, there are going to be 2 jousters at the top. Despite the fact that they are ghosts, they are immune to the power pellets, so they won't go blue if I try to go over them when they are, or when the rest of the ghosts are blue, they'll still kill Pac-Man. So we just want to avoid them. Yeah, so there's a minigame immediately after this maze that's, in my opinion, one of the most fun in the game casually, because it's a giant shooting gallery where you can shoot a bunch of, cardboard ghosts and fruit that pops up, get a bunch of different points. It's fun, but because this is a speedrun, I want to finish it as quickly as possible, and the game will end as soon as you run out of ammo. So essentially what that entails is just button mashing until we run out of ammo. So yeah, most fun minigame and it's over like that. So this is the first maze in the game to have a little timer you can see in the upper right hand corner of the screen. If that runs out, which we don't have to worry about in the speedrun, but if it does, in unskippable cutscene roleplay, you've noticed that I've been skipping most of the ones that happen before minigames. But in unskippable cutscene roleplay, where the dragon wakes up and essentially kills Pac-Man, again, this is a speedrun, we don't have to worry about it, but it's just something to note. It's pretty humorous. So just like that, we're done in the first medieval section of the game. This is the Egyptian section, the second one rather, and here you can see a bunch of different colored tiles. So whenever I run over one of the tiles, the corresponding block with a power pellet on it will come down, allowing Pac-Man to go over it and eat power pellet on it. Funny enough, this is the one instance where Pac-Man can jump over a pellet and he'll still eat it. So when the platform is lowered, Pac-Man can jump over it and he'll still eat it for some reason. But if he does that in any other part of the game, it just won't register. I'm not sure why, but that's just how it is. So this maze has some spikes strewn around it. They're not lethal. Pac-Man will just, if he gets hit by them, he'll be paused for 2 seconds, he'll jump up in the air, he'll grab his booty in pain, and it'll be a time loss. And the cycles will then be off, so. Again, just something we want to make sure we route into this maze. And fortunately he is able to jump over them like that, so. Yeah, there are very few obstacles where you can't jump over them, you can't jump over the snakes we saw earlier. This maze takes elements from the last 2, so at the top you can see there are the 2 colored tiles that we can lower pellets with, and we've got spikes all over as well. But besides that, nothing major. This next maze is actually one of the most fun ones to do in the run. So what it entails is essentially there are going to be 6 different snakes guarding 3 different colored sections at the top of the maze. And these snakes, unlike the other ones we've seen, will actually kill Pac-Man if he tries to go past them. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to grab a flute that's at the bottom of the maze. You can kind of see there sticking up out of the water. And what the developers intended you to do was to make 2 or more trips up and down, because the flute doesn't give you a lot of time. When Pac-Man collects it, the snakes will all go in their baskets for a limited amount of time. And that usually gives Pac-Man enough time to enter and exit 2 of the 3 colored sections. However, with good routing, we can actually enter 2 and exit 2, and then at the very end, we can enter the last one. It will cost a life, because we won't be able to get out before the snakes pop out of their baskets. So that will cost a life, but the death abuse actually does save 10 to 12, maybe even more seconds, over just making 2 trips And that strat was actually found by PinballWiz45B, another really good runner at this game. And it can be a little frustrating if the ghosts decide not to cooperate. I didn't get the ideal pattern, but I was still able to get the one cycle there using the Death Abuse. So overall, I still saved time on this over taking 2 or more trips. And this is another chase minigame based off of Indiana Jones. Except Indiana Jones actually makes it out alive. So here we have the first, like, actually kind of intricate 3D maze, because it also has the spikes we saw from before. They're still not lethal though, so we can work around them pretty decently. But obviously this is routed in such a way that if we do get hit by anything or need to like adjust ourselves even slightly, the cycles will be off from what we're used to. So fortunately the ghosts are giving me a pretty good pattern right now. Wait for the spikes to go off. Yeah. There are a few frames before the spikes actually retract where you can go over them and the sprites will overlap, but Pac-Man won't get hurt. And just like that, we're out of the Egyptian era. And now we get to see our first Wild West. So first I'm going to make a beeline for that dot in front of the snake. If you hesitate at all, the snake will bite Pac-Man. And these snakes are not lethal, however, they're worse than the snakes we saw before, because they'll bite Pac-Man twice instead of just once. So it'll waste twice as much time if you do get bit by them. But it's not the biggest time loss ever, so not a huge deal. But I haven't been bit so far, so that's pretty great. So there's another minigame after this that's basically based on one of these things is not like the others. There will be 3 barrels with different objects resting on top of them. But if I choose the wrong one, it'll end the minigame immediately. So this maze has this tumbleweed that won't kill Pac-Man, but it will make him flinch for about 2 seconds. You'll see that it can still hit Pac-Man when the power pellet's activated. However, if there is a power pellet activated, it will, for some reason, tend to stay away from Pac-Man still. So you can kind of use that to your advantage. Still don't want to get hit by it, though, because that won't change anything. And hopefully it cooperates here. Yes, it does. Excellent. So this maze, I intentionally don't use the overhead camera for lag reduction purposes. So you can see it's a little bigger than a lot of the other mazes we've done. And it doesn't technically lag the game, like it won't go any slower if you do utilize the top-down camera over this one. But there is a little bit of input lag that it adds. It's only by like maybe 3 or 4 frames, but it's enough to really mess with me. So I tend to just stick with this camera until I'm on the upper floors. Yeah, a nice thing you'll see in a second is that when you are on the upper floors, there's a nice path pretty much laid out for you, so you can easily just follow that from one end to another. The only thing you really have to account for in this case, like once you get to this point of the map, is if there are any ghosts on the upper floors. It's about, okay, yeah, kind of like Blinky here. Yeah, fortunately he decided to turn right around and not mess with me too much. So that was pretty clean. This maze is really interesting in that there is a train that will go through on its own cycles periodically throughout this maze. You might have noticed that the gates will close right before the train comes up. If Pac-Man or the ghosts get stuck on the tracks when they do close, they can't escape at all, and the train is almost guaranteed to run them over and kill them. But the way I have this maze routed, you don't have to worry about that, because you'll be able to come up to the last pellets on the tracks just before the gates open back up. And just like that, we're in another button masher, except this is actually a button masher. It's possible to beat this button masher with 3 seconds left on the timer, but just due to the way my computer handles inputs, I usually get only 1 or 0 seconds left on the timer. On a better computer, I'd be able to do 2 or 3 seconds remaining, but I don't even get to finish Joy. So this is the first of 3 segmented mazes, which basically means that there are a bunch of miniature mazes wrapped up in the same maze, and I have to finish each one before I can move on to the next. So this one cleverly uses train cars to get that across. So there are 4 in here, each one adds a new ghost to the equation. So the first one had just Blinky, this one has Pinky added, and you can see Inky over there on the third, and then Clyde is on the next. You can see here, even though the sprites of Pac-Man and Blinky are overlapping, you can still safely get to the pallet before Blinky's hitbox shows up, so you can take advantage of that pretty nicely. And this is one of the mazes where you actually can't use the top-down camera for whatever reason, even though it definitely looks like you should be able to. But it's fine. So here's another maze where I intentionally don't use the top-down camera because this is also a very large map. Funny thing about it, it's actually the exact same as the first maze in this game, only with 2 squares of dots around it, so you can kind of see there. So I pretty much solve it the same way I did the first time around, except I need to account for the 2 rims at the top. So I need to make sure I end right at that elevator. And now we just go around. So yeah, this game's pretty fun. Some of the maze designs are a little uncreative, like this one, but still, it's nice to... This is a really nice breather point in the run, because you can, just sit back, crack your knuckles for a bit, because you don't have to worry about directional inputs when Pac-Man's going in straight lines. Yeah, this is actually... This is really the calm before the storm of this maze, of this game, because the next maze is one of the worst in the speedrun. So you'll see here that there are a bunch of tables indicated by the blue tablecloths there, and you'll notice that Pinky has a different design than all of the other ghosts, in that she's carrying a tray around. Now, if she goes over any of the tables where Pac-Man has eaten dots off of them, she will replace any of those dots, and Pac-Man will need to go back and re-eat them. So you can have this maze routed pretty much perfectly, but if Pinky decides that she wants to replace any of the pallets you've already eaten, well, now you have to backtrack, and that can waste a little bit of time depending on when she does it. But fortunately, she's cooperating so far. I don't think she's placed a single one down yet, so that's nice. Yeah, you can see there that even though she went over the table, since she was blue, she couldn't place any down, and she doesn't actually place any down here, so that was a really good banquet bash. And this is a maze where it looks like I should be able to use the top-down camera, but I'm not able to for a reason we'll see very shortly. I do want to point you to the upper right part of the screen, however, where there are 2 counters for red dots and blue dots. Those are looking at the floor tiles on each side of the maze. There's a certain amount you need to eat, and once you do eat that amount, there are 2 portions on the top of the maze that will open up, and those are the actual reason we can't use the top-down camera for this maze. So once I eat these last couple, that section will pop up, and I'm able to eat the last of these dots. And we'll just do the same with the blue side. Alright, nice and easy. This is the second of the segmented mazes. So this has a dungeon theme. We've got a bunch of skeletons chasing us around, no big deal. And there are 3 of these portions we need to go through instead of the 4 from before. Besides that, there's a cool little trick you can do. It doesn't technically save any time, but you can use an audio cue when you're going from one part of the dungeon to the next. I'll demonstrate it here in a second. So like right here, while the wall is getting out of your way visually, you can go to the side for a little bit and collect one of the dots before you can actually see what you're doing. So, like I said, it doesn't save any time, but like it's a nice little buffer for when the maze actually does decide to load in fully. And in case you're curious, no, you're not able to go back to past mazes once you've moved on. Or sub-mazes, rather. Yeah, the most unfortunate thing about not being able to use the top-down camera is when you're going down the maze, it becomes really difficult to tell if there are any ghosts coming up on you. So you do need to react pretty quickly if they're not under the effects of Power Pellet. But overall, that was pretty clean dungeons. Yeah, so this is another one of these things. It's not like the other minigame, except it doesn't end immediately when you hit one of the incorrect items. It'll just reduce your time a bit, but either way, we're still out of there pretty quickly. And here we've got another cycle-based maze. We pretty much just want to avoid cannonballs because they are lethal. So I'm able to just squeeze out of that one. In case you can't tell, like, the middle portion of the maze is kind of like a hill, where it's elevated in the middle and just kind of slopes outward. And once we're done with this maze, we will be out of the medieval section and popped back into the Wild West part of the game. So here we've got another 3D maze, nothing too special about this one over the others. I do like how, you'll see in a second, the ghost designs for the Wild West portions all have, like, really huge hats. Yeah, you can see right there. I don't know. I think it's funny. Yeah, there is an optimal route for this maze, but it is really risky because it does significantly delay when you grab a power pellet like it did there. So I typically don't go for it, it's a little risky, but... And right here, this is kind of a, like, pseudo-chase minigame, where the game expects you to mash the control button in order to move forward instead of just having it auto-run for you like all the other ones do. So there we basically just sit there, move left and right a bit if we want to, it doesn't really make a difference. Funny thing about this maze, it's actually pretty much the exact same as the first maze in this game, they just reskinned it. So another case of really creative game design, and that was an unfortunate turnaround, but it's fine. I think that's the first unintentional death this run, so not a big deal. Whoop. Missed that. There we go. And this maze kind of introduces underwater mechanics in that in the upper right you see Pac-Man does have an air gauge. It will replenish the more he eats pellets or Pac Dots, so they kind of function the same way as coins do in Super Mario 64. But aside from that, this is, again, the same as the last maze, just turned 90 degrees to the right. It's just something I noticed at some point. And that said, we have one of the worst mechanics in the game, which is the minecart mechanic. So you'll see in the upper portion of this maze, there are a bunch of tracks. Once you go on there, the game will put you in this minecart. And the way it works is, firstly, it'll automatically make turns for you if you're at a junction. So that's kind of convenient, even though you can't really tell just by watching. But another thing they do is they don't let you turn around unless you hit a T intersection. So if a ghost is coming up on me, I can't just turn around and say, you know, you're not going to hit me today. I have to either make a turn to get away from it, or I need to jump over the ghost like that. So yeah, right there I elected to jump over Inky instead of turning around, mostly because I couldn't turn around and delay it. And this minigame actually deals entirely with the minecart mechanics, and this is the only camera I get, so... With really good luck, I can finish this minigame with 14 seconds left. Usually I elect to take a safer route that is only a second slower, but it is safer, so it's usually worth it to go for it. Alright, and it looks like it paid off. So you don't want to die here. Unfortunately, there's no way to really work a death abuse into this route really well, but if you do die here, it doesn't cost any of your lives, so that's pretty nice. And this is a maze that completely utilizes the minecart mechanic, so we're not quite done with it yet. Small death there, but I spawn right back where I died anyway, so it's not a big deal. Sometimes Blinky cooperates there, sometimes it doesn't. Just kind of have to roll with the punches. So here we kind of want to work our way around the perimeter. Jumping over ghosts to make sure we don't eat them if it's reasonable. See, right there you could say I turned around, but it was pretty much all because I was at the end of a T intersection. Otherwise I would not be able to. Now I kind of work my way back around the perimeter, catching the dots I missed, because since you can't turn around, it's really rough to make up any dots you miss. So figuring out how to route this maze is pretty crucial to the speedrun. And with that, we're out of the Wild West and thrown into the future. Because plot reasons. So you're gonna jump up that slope, and then run back down to pick up speed. Yeah, this is neat because this maze utilizes both slopes and elevators, which I think is kind of cool. It's like you can use that elevator to go up and down because like it doesn't matter which way it's going regarding speed. Then I can like come over here to slide down. So nice little optimization you can do there by going clockwise around the map instead of counterclockwise. Alright, and here we have another match-in minigame. Oh, where is... I missed a dot somewhere. Oh, there it is. So yeah, this minigame is another memory-based one. So let's see here. Yeah, this one is a lot less forgiving because it doesn't have as many good patterns as the first one. Yeah, fortunately that wasn't too bad though. 14 seconds left is pretty alright. So this maze has both teeter-totters and the electrical dischargers of sorts. I'm not sure what to call them, but they won't kill Pac-Man, so again, we just want to avoid them if we can. It'd be a mild hindrance, but no big deal if we do get hit by one of them. Let's see here. Yeah, funny enough, the ghosts can't get hit by the electrical discharges here for some reason. Like, there are some obstacles that will affect them, like the train, but other ones, like the snakes and the electrical discharges, just don't have any effect whatsoever. And here's the second to last 3D maze in this run. Don't worry, they're almost done, so hopefully you won't get too motion sick. Yeah, this is one of the more daunting ones to learn, but once you do learn the route, it's pretty darn consistent. Yeah, more electrical stuff you have to watch for. They still won't kill Pac-Man. Yeah, just go over them when you can, because there are pellets over, I'm pretty sure, all but one of them. So, you do need to collect them at some point, but when you do is pretty much up to you, as long as you don't have to worry about getting shocked. And right here, another chase minigame we just intentionally lose. This is the rocket ship. This is, in my opinion, one of the coolest mazes in the entire game. So it works kind of like the maze we saw earlier, where we had to collect all the dots on the two halves of the map to make different parts of the map open up. So you can see on the sides that there are two wings that we need to lower by eating all of the dots over the outlined portions of the maze. So right there you can kind of hop on it because the traversable parts will load in before it does visually. So you can... It looks kind of cool because Pac-Man runs right through that cylinder before it actually disappears. So that's pretty cool. Another thing you'll see here is like a few minor jumps there. There's a slight curvature, I'm not sure how easily you can see it, to the rocket that I try to account for, so when I'm going closer to the center I'll try to make him jump. If I'm going towards the outside I'll try to make him stay on the ground as much as possible, but again, another little minor optimization that goes a long way. And after this minigame we're actually going into the last maze. So this is a segmented maze, and also a 3D maze. So it starts with just Blinky and Clyde, the red and orange ghosts. The next segment will add, I believe, Pinky, and then Inky will be added to the last one. So we got through that first section pretty smoothly. Alright, Pinky giving us a little bit of grief there, but it's fine, until she does that. Alright. So time ends as soon as I eat the last dot on this portion. Yeah, this maze has seen a lot of reroutes in my time running this game, so this is really consistent at this point. And that is time. So, yeah, it was about mid-42. That's actually pretty good. World record is 41:47 by me right now. So I'd say a good estimate for this is 45 minutes to be really safe, but I am very comfortable setting a 44-minute estimate. With all of that said, thank you so much for your consideration in being part of SGDQ 2019. I really appreciate you. No, excuse me. I appreciate you sitting through this run, and I hope you have a great day. Take it easy.